we're not even really consciously aware of what's driving our distrust or aggravation or even ambition, right? We're not even fully aware of that.
Welcome to Season 3 of Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations, with your host, executive leadership coach and CEO of the Granger Network, Kari Granger, and me, Paul Adams, CEO of Sound Financial Group. This season focuses on trust. This is episode 42, Potatoes and Van Goghs.
Welcome back to Leadership Impact. Today, we are going to explore the relationship between Van Gogh original masterpiece art, the russet potato, and trust. Paul, as we were getting ready to record a different episode, you brought in this major life transformation you've been having. And, we just thought it might be worth exploring on our podcast, the implications of that in building trusting relationships. So would you be willing to share that with the rest of our listeners?
Yes, given that we have thousands of our closest, most intimate friends listening, then of course I will share it with the audience. So I was listening to a guy that we've had on our podcast named Scott Adams, and he was talking a little bit about the amount of anxiety people face. And he just told a simple story, which I probably will not do justice, but I'll cover it much more quickly than he did, about if you were given an assignment, and he said, it's just half a mile up the road, and you just need to carry a regular old potato from like a inexpensive sack of potatoes, but just one potato, walk it up the street to the museum and drop it off. Really easy. Anybody could do it. Walk half a mile. Wouldn't think anything about the walk. You'd walk it like you would anywhere else, and it would be simple. You could interact with people freely, and everything would be fine.
Might drink a cup of coffee on the way.
Yeah, there's just you might be holding a cup of coffee or pick one up, or you could take a slight detour, but you'd certainly arrive safely at the museum. But if instead he handed that, for all intents and purposes, we'll just call a priceless painting of Van Gogh's Starry Night.
Original.
And you've just got the frame of it, and now you have to carry it the same half a mile. And how everything would occur as a threat. A bird flying overhead could do something. A wind could blow some dust your direction. Somebody could bump into you. A car could splash water out, like all sorts of things. You would orient to this half a mile walk with an extraordinary amount of anxiety potentially. Now, I don't really suffer from anxiety, but being what people might typically refer to as a type A personality, I would walk around looking at everything certainly as a threat. And my wife's joke is I don't have a fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. I have a fight, fight, or fight mechanism. And so I would navigate life oftentimes looking at things as potential threats that need to be avoided or combated as I move through life. And for the most part, it's always there. I've just gotten through a bunch of training and coaching and all that. I realized when I heard this story and then have been operating with it for about a month that I've just done a good job of throwing a bunch of paint over that wallpaper that is how had been wired up until that moment. And a great example was about a week after hearing it the first time, I was flying to a conference and just had a tremendous amount of travel breakdowns, from the people on the aircraft to the way our rental car went. And I'm talking probably some of the worst travel woes I've had. And yet what I was able to do in taking on this idea of the difference between the potato and the priceless painting, I was able to just kind of say to myself, no, I'm just going to be the potato here. There is nothing that's of serious threat here. There's nothing that I need to combat or argue with. We might have to change some plans. We had to walk away from one car rental and just rent another car. But it wasn't enough money to really threaten anything. But I would have previously been agitated, upset, bothered on behalf of the distrust of why did we make reservations if the cars aren't there? Like that kind of thing. And I found myself not only not having the cognitive load of that trying to cover up how I was actually feeling inside so I can operate in polite society, I just found myself able to just totally let it go and really enjoy my travels. And then I've had several instances since then of these interactions that would normally have frustrated me, not frustrating me anymore, and no difference in my capacity to act effectively toward what's important to me in my future. But realize, like, even I remember there was something that got me agitated that my wife brought up like 2 months ago, and I was able to circle back to her and go, I was thinking about that, and I'm okay if you want to do it that other way, just because I had been thinking we do it this way, and I got agitated, but I'm really okay with it going either way. And so I'm even revisiting past times where I had some frustration through this new filter and realizing that it just wasn't as important as I was making that painting I was walking that same half a mile as the potato.
Yeah, why I thought this might be a possible area to explore with the theme of trust is, as you're speaking, I remember Charles Feltman's definition of trust, which is making what's most important to me vulnerable to the actions of others. Right? So making something that is important to me vulnerable to the actions of others. So if I'm walking from the museum, or if I'm walking that half mile to the museum with a potato, that's not that important to me, right? So it doesn't require a lot of trust, right? It's not like something at risk that I'm making vulnerable to the actions of others. However, if I have a Van Gogh original, I mean, that's something that is really important and it's super vulnerable to the actions of others. I'm not even going to be carrying a coffee mug, right?
Yeah.
But in life, just hearing the differences that is made for you, in life, sometimes our reputation or our opinions or our beliefs or, our perspective on a matter can be as important to us, if not examined critically, as like the Van Gogh painting. And we start to see others' actions, to include what they say, as a threat, right, to our own perspectives, opinions, reputations, travel plans, etc.
Yes.
So how quickly do we embrace that distrustful stance, that cautious stance, as if we were carrying a Van Gogh to the art museum, when really, what's at risk is just my point of view.
Yeah, it's like, I guess to stick with that Van Gogh analogy, not to push it too far, but would be the real threat isn't somebody destroying the Van Gogh. It's that they might have something to say about it that disagrees with what you think of it.
Yeah, totally.
And you said something there that I'm kind of at least really present to. And maybe we have a lot of listeners that are facing this also, is nobody would know that I was like that all the time on the inside. Like very few people would know. There's a stand-up comedian who his wife says to him something like, "How can you go 0 to 100 like just like that and go off the handle?" He's like, "I'm idling at 70 all the time. Like I'm not at 0." And I've really noticed just in the last month, just this one distinction has had me actually able to idle far lower inside than I have in my maybe adult life. And so it's that, you're right, that it's not that somebody's going to destroy my painting. It's that somebody's going to have something negative to say about all the work I'm doing to protect the painting, or me personally, or you're being foolish. It's just an old piece of paper, whatever those things are that they might be saying that are unimportant or don't matter.
Yeah. And my question to you then is, how would you say that that's impacted the trust, or if it has at all, in relationships that you have? Has that impacted at all the trust between you and other people?
Well, I'm noticing one of the first things is that if people make a mistake, we've talked in the past about realizing that part of trust is the ability to know that trust can be broken. And I think that people are now noticing that I'm not I've watched some people misstep with me a little bit. Like I was at this conference and a guy who's an engineer and just a very straight talker, but maybe not the most wildly socially adept. I had gone up to the microphone. We're both walking up at the same time. And he just tapped me on the shoulder. He says, "May I ask why it is you decided you could just step in front of the microphone for me?" I was like, "I didn't realize I had my apologies here." And, it's in front of a room. A bunch of people saw the interaction. And literally my business partner said to me, "I've never seen you do that before. I've seen you say those things before, but you always had what he refers to as Paul's scary smile." Where
Yes.
I knew that this, like, you were being polite to this person.
Yeah.
But they are done with you. Their future is over with you.
Yeah, you've cut it off. Mm-hmm.
And that just wasn't there.
You're being a potato.
I was being the potato in that case, and not diminishing. In fact, excelling at the very things I wanted to be able to do, like have a good relationship with the room, have fun with the people that are sitting to my right and left, or the people watching the situation. And before, my internal, how I was interacting with other people was with very fundamental distrust that nearly anything somebody could say, if it didn't immediately back what I was going to say, I now needed to navigate the way that they were thinking and help shift the way they were thinking to move the way I was thinking.
Yeah, I could even think, what's a practical application for me is I think it would be worth it if I could identify what's a potato and what actually is really important to me. So often we identify with our beliefs and our strongly held opinions, and we're not even really consciously aware of what's driving our distrust or aggravation or even ambition, right? We're not even fully aware of that. And if I could increase my awareness about, what's really that priceless painting and what's a potato? What do I really care about in this relationship? Or what do I really care about in this situation? That conference example just reminds me of this is a potato situation. And I think what I'm hearing from you is the impact of that is actually my trustworthiness with others, right? So my question to you is, do you feel like your trustworthiness, like you being a little bit less agitatable, has improved in, I don't know, your personal life or your work life?
Oh, well, I'll give one that, again, just a couple of months ago would have had me maybe not outwardly, maybe I would have covered it, but we had a thing that I needed to go to in Seattle and had picked up one of my team. We were driving from north of Seattle downtown. It was just a terrible traffic day. I've never seen anything quite like it. To get to the Seattle Yacht Club took an hour and 40 minutes, which should have taken about 55 minutes. At the time of day we were doing it. And the entire time is, we stayed in communication with the person organizing the conference, and we did arrive there, but I arrived there in a way that I was a valuable contribution to the room as a participant and not as somebody that's, trying to wind down from the amount of frustration from getting there, which allowed me to be more like trust of the room. And in fact, there was a gentleman who was one of the speakers in the room who, he asked a question, I answered, like a good audience member would if they weren't stewing about traffic. And he says, "Oh, what's your name?" And I told him my name. He said, "Oh, I've heard of you." Now, had I still been in the agitation, showing up to that room that would have never even been possible and opened up new possibilities for a relationship with other people in the room. And it would have been the most horrible type of opportunity to miss, which is the one that nobody announces didn't occur. That sounded like a maybe much more Lots of times I think things can happen that we don't realize we missed an opportunity. With that, let's just take a short pause for an important message from the Granger Network.
Hi there, I'm Lindsay, and I work at the Granger Network. You know, so many people think of the human parts of us, our moods and feelings and personalities, as something to be handled, controlled, set aside in the name of results. But we believe the very opposite is true. Those messy human parts of us, they don't knock us off the path to performance. They are the path. This is what we dedicate our lives to, putting high-performing leaders on the path to truly game-changing leadership by mastering what makes us human. One of the ways we do that is through one-on-one coaching. In the uncertainty of the coronavirus pandemic, this has been a huge support for our clients. If you're a leader looking to navigate that uncertainty, reach out to us on our website, grangernetwork.com, and we'll explore possibilities with you. If coaching isn't your thing, we've got tons of free content on our website as well. So head to grangernetwork.com and let's continue the conversation.
And with that, let's jump back to our episode.
You know, I think that there's a real strong connection here between, you know, your general orientation in life and even just the possibility of trust between people, right? Between you and others and, you know, what trust makes possible. You know, I think about one of the things that my husband and I often talk about is, you know, the more intimate the relationship, the less mature you can be in the relationship,
Yes.
right? And so, you know, I know at work all day long, I'm just dealing with, you know, people's strongly held like opinions, perspectives, you know, their emotions, their frustrations. I mean, because I'm an executive coach, you know, their anxieties. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm great all day long, right? I got potatoes all day long. And at the end of the day, I have no willpower left, right? And I don't realize the energy that it's taken. So, you know, I go home and, you know, everything's a Van Gogh painting, everything. Like, you know, did you do the dishes? If the dishes weren't done, that was a Van Gogh painting right there, right?
Yes.
So then, you know, it has me even think like, when you can trust an even keelness about things, right? Then that's somebody I know that I can act and interact with. When you can't trust how somebody's going to react to small things or big things, the trust goes down. You know, and I'm just thinking about also, you know, this client that I have in higher education, and I was with them a couple weeks ago, and I was really just astonished and curious at the same time at the lack of trust between the faculty and the administrators. And again, it seemed like everything had become that Van Gogh painting. Everything was at risk in every interaction, right? And what they weren't connected to is what underneath it all is so important to me that's animating my intensity about the situation. So for example, if the administrators want to create a standardized way of doing curriculum or a standardized way of enrolling new students or, you know, some kind of standardization, then, you know, what would happen is, you know, the faculty might think, well, you know, you don't understand what we're going through, or you're taking away our freedom and autonomy. And it could be something so simple like show up on time that would incite a big response, right? And then there was the vice versa situation. And so what happened is as we started going through, you know, a facilitated conversation, we got back connected to what is it that is really important to me. And it was just, look, we have to find a pathway forward that fulfills on both standardization and autonomy, like both of these fundamental cares. And if I can trust you to not blow up at every conversation, we can actually work through this. But if everything is like, you know, a huge deal, we can never have the critical conversations to work through these seeming polarities. And so, I love this idea. I'm going to be thinking about this idea, the relationship between potatoes, Van Gogh paintings, and trust.
Yes. And I think that one thing that for me may have made it more difficult, and to your point, like all day long, highly consequential situations in our work. And I wasn't treating them like a potato. I was, in my mind, holding the Van Gogh and then trying to pretend, as I protected it with every fiber of my being, that I was treating it like a potato. Like, hey, it's no big deal, except it's life or death to me. And that cognitive load being that I just feel like I just don't have now is what seems to be changing it a lot. So I don't get to the end of my day, and I've had this willpower muscle working all day long to not let that happen. And then, you get agitated with your spouse or whatever it is. The drive home sets somebody off. Maybe, and just to consider it, like interacting with every concern as if it's really a fundamental life or death concern. And there are some for people. They're just not all that. So the biggest thing I took away from that conversation is that, which I'd never been able to fully articulate before, is what I kind of brought up off the cuff of like the amount of effort it would be to paint over wallpaper until the wallpaper couldn't be seen. And my internal orientation to so many things is a threat. With significant training and coaching, I've done a lot of work to kind of create this sarcophagus around that so that very few people, unless they know me very well, would know the tells. Like when Corey would say, ooh, Paul just got polite with somebody, oops. Like that vendor.
There's no more relationship there.
Yes, from Paul's perspective. And they don't even know that I just like effectively assassinated the relationship in my own mind. And that just takes a lot of effort to, on the outside, look like a calm, cool, peaceful individual, while on the inside, I'm revving at 70 out of 100 all the time.
Yeah.
And what I've walked around with for decades of trying to throttle that back in everybody else's experience of my internal state, and what that leaves on the table in terms of my just ability to engage people or, things like that. Like, I don't know if you noticed, Lindsay, but I was asking you about your weekend. And in the middle of asking you about your weekend, I'm like, I don't think I've ever asked her about her weekend. And it's because internally, I was just using up so much capacity. I didn't have time to hear about somebody's weekend. And so I'm just noticing I'm saying new things and interacting with people in new ways as a result of maybe not having to carry around so much effort to keep that wound up little monster inside. So,
oh my gosh, that's really interesting because I can now hear the bridge between, just like the hygiene of my own internal state, right? And the space that makes available internally, which increases my capacity and my ability to even just be related to others freely.
Yes.
Right? So I don't have to be protecting every little ounce of focus, energy, time, minutes, right? Just I just hear a lot of freedom and space and capacity.
Yes. And that's how it feels to me now.
Yeah, really, really good. Thank you, Paul. I think this exploration was a worthwhile journey. And again, the practical thing I'm taking away is really taking a look at each situation to see, how am I relating to this? And what is really, really, at stake here? And, is this just a potato?
Yeah, it's really great. Thanks for being willing to go through this.
Yeah, awesome. Well, to all of our listeners, we hope that this has been a contribution to your leadership impact.
Thank you for tuning into Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. Subscribe now at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.